Hello, my name is Jim Roberts. I'm chaplain at Pocklington School, but I spent most of my time teaching religious studies in all kinds of state schools. And today I'd like to look at the whole question of science and religion, and in particular Christianity. It usually comes across as people saying, oh, science has disproved God, or I don't believe in God, I believe in science, something like that. And it usually centres on the question, often, not always, but often on evolution and the book of Genesis. And certainly I think if you do take the first few chapters of Genesis completely literally, the creation story, then I think there is certainly a conflict between part of the Bible and part of science. And undoubtedly there is a conflict. But I am not one of those people who thinks there is a conflict between God, the Bible and science at all. I, like most Christians throughout history, have not taken these Bible passages literally at face value. Now, there are two main ways at looking at this problem. The first one is what is normally commonly called the God of the gaps. Now, God of the gaps is basically saying that God does what science can't explain. If science hasn't got an answer for it, then hey, that proves that's God. The problem with this, of course, is that as science increases, as technology gets better, so is the room left for God gets smaller and smaller. And of course, that really doesn't do justice, in my view, at all to God, because we know that God is the God of all creation, not just of those bits that we can't explain. So God is at work everywhere as well. But also, I think, science and religion are two ways of looking at the same thing. Science asks the question, how? Give me an explanation. Give reasons for its existence. Religion asks a different question. It asks, why? Why is it here? What is the purpose of it? And I think also it's very important to point out the idea that a scientific explanation is not always the only or indeed the best explanation of something. Can I give you an example? The example I usually comes from a classroom, so apologies for those people who have never been in a classroom before. I walk into a classroom, a window has just been broken, and I ask, what has happened? A scientific explanation could be, well sir, when an object weighing 10 grams is accelerating at a speed of 0.73 meters per second and reaches a pane of glass of 3 millimeters thickness, it experiences a result of kinetic and indeed potential energy, resulting in the atomic framework of the glass being broken. You get the idea, don't you? That's a scientific explanation. Another explanation is, sir, I threw my pencil case at George and I missed him and hit the window. There are two explanations. One is scientific, one is not scientific. The two are very useful. But please note the scientific explanation is not the only explanation, nor indeed the best explanation. So likewise, a scientific explanation of something doesn't necessarily have the whole story about it. It doesn't give us a broader picture of something. So I think that is important to remember as well. And also, there is a lot of common ground between science and Christianity. In fact, you could argue that Christianity gave science the permission and the framework to flourish and develop. It was the belief that there was a God who ordered things, which made people realize that actually the world was ordered and not completely random, which enabled science to develop. So actually, there is a huge common area between Christianity and science. Many scientists are and have been Christians. In fact, some of the most famous scientists of all have been Christians. Think of Isaac Newton. Think of Bacon. Not that kind of Bacon, no, the scientist Bacon. Think of Boyle, Faraday, and even some of the most modern scientists now. Francis Collins, who headed up the Human Genome Project, is a well-known evangelical Christian. So clearly for them, there was no discrepancy between science on the one hand and religion or God, Christianity on the other. Interestingly also, both science and religion need faith. faith in the religious sense is quite obvious, but it's also true in the religious sense. They need to have faith that actually what they do there is also applicable over here. There's all kinds of faith that sometimes you can't explain things, and indeed on many levels of science they often begin to use almost paradoxical language about, on the quantum level, about very small things, and also about light. It's very difficult to explain using ordinary language, and they have to use almost paradoxical and strange and language of faith to explain it. And also I think both Christianity, religion and science both create awe and wonder. And in that sense, they are workers together in the same thing. And it's no accident at all that even over the Cavendish Institute of Science in Cambridge, there is a Bible verse over the doorway as you walk in. So I would encourage anybody who has problems with the discrepancy, so-called, between the Bible and the Scripture and Christianity and science, on the other hand, to think carefully. Because actually, I think, if you do so, you'll find there is no discrepancy at all.